Because I think I'll get a better view.
Bert.
Where's Bert?
You gotta make a grand
You know, like he wanted to be a part of the crowd.
All right, well, hello and welcome back to Davidson, everyone. Thank you for joining us this weekend and for today's back to school class. We have a really great panel here today, and I'm sure they appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you being here. So, give you a quick overview of who you'll be hearing from today. So our first panelist, Roger Brown, Davidson class of 1978, is the president of Berklee College of Music. Since his appointment in 2004, he's pioneered the launch of a suite of educational institutes, including Africana Studies and the Berklee Global Jazz Institute, among others. He's overseen the creation of the world's largest online music education program, created an international campus in Valencia, Spain, and completed a merger with the Boston Conservatory to establish the world's most comprehensive training ground for global careers in music, dance, and theater. Our second panelist, Bertus Downs, also graduated. Sorry, I had an awkward pause. I didn't know if we were going to clap or not. Our second panelist, Bertus Downs, also graduated from Davidson in 1978 and later received his law degree in 1981 from the University of Georgia School of Law. He represented the band REM throughout the band's storied 30-year career and is still an advisor to their various endeavors since their disbandment in 2011. In 1988, Downs originated the entertainment law course at the University School of Law. Since then, he's regularly nourished his interest in teaching by speaking at various continuing legal education and music industry conferences, and he's lectured widely at universities and law schools in the United States and abroad. Downs' main professional interest, like most everyone else in the creative industries these days, is the changing legal and business landscape in the digital age of ubiquity. He's an outspoken advocate for our country's public schools. He's focused on fighting the growing corporatization of public schools and the ensuing damage to the true and effective teaching and learning, as well as working on efforts to strengthen our local schools and enhance the teaching profession. Bertus Downs. I gotta go rewrite my bio.
That was too long. Slow him down a little bit.
You can tell I didn't go to grad school.
Our third panelist, John Huey, a member of the class of 1978, is a music agent at leading entertainment and sports agency, Creative Artists Agency, CAA, and co-head of CAA's Music Nashville office, where he represents many of the world's leading musicians, including Faith Hill, Jennifer Nettles, Zach Brown Band, Lady Annabella, Kelsey Ballerini, Michael W. Smith, and Amy Grant, among others. He's helped guide the growth of the agency's Music City operations from 2 employees to more than 80 agents and executives specializing in booking, tour marketing, and brand partnerships. In 1999, Huey won a Grammy Award for Best Southern, Country, or Bluegrass Gospel Album for the Apostle soundtrack, for which he served as a producer. He's been honored numerous times throughout his career, including being named Polestar's Third Coast Agent of the Year 8 times. In 2015, he was inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. John Huey.
Woo!
And finally, our panel moderator is William Brown, a member of the Davidson College class of 1970. William has 40 years of experience in student activities and college union administration. Most recently, he served as the director of the Knobloch Campus Center and Student Activities here at Davidson. After retiring in 2017, He and his wife, Mary Jo Clark, have relocated to Montreat, North Carolina. Please help me in welcoming Roger, Burtis, John, and William.
Well, this is going to be fun. I know you all are looking forward to hearing these guys talk and tell their stories, and I am too. I think I was invited to participate because if you saw the advertisement for this event, it says from college biz to show biz, and so I got connected with you all as part of your college biz, and when I came back to Davidson to work with C. Shaw Smith in fall of 76, you guys were, of course, juniors, and I had been working with juvenile offenders and doing some and so I was really prepared to work with you. But I frankly was not at all prepared to work with concerts. But I was the advisor to the concert committee. Now, everybody knew that C. Shaw Smith was the advisor to the concert committee, but he wanted me to do the legwork and all of that. And so John and Burtis actually taught me what it was that I was supposed to be doing. So it was an interesting kind of relationship that we had, kind of a circular thing. But anyway, so they've gone a long way since those days, and so I really look forward to hearing what you have to say. Roger, of course, Roger and I did some things in the union, and Roger was very involved in all kinds of student activities. And so you heard their bios, and we know a lot about where they've gone, but I'd really like to hear from you all a sketch anyway of where you feel like you've been, what got you from your graduation on May 28, 1978 to where you are today. And I know that's a great big question, but if you could
I'll go first because mine's really short.
Okay.
Luck. In law school, I knew I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer because I went to law school because I didn't think of anything else to do and I didn't really want to work. And so I went to law school to kind of figure it out for 3 years, and I wanted to be John and I both just thought of it today. We worked together at the Fulton County Jail in freshman summer, and that kind of changed a lot of how I viewed the world and where I fit in the world, and it made me think a lot about doing things like legal services and legal aid and death penalty work, and that's what I thought I would do when I got out of law school. There were no jobs. You remember there was an election in 1980 that fall, so that my spring of law school wasn't a great time to be looking, and I got lucky enough to be asked by the law school to teach the research and writing class, which I think they got far enough down the class rank roll, they got to me next and said, "You want to teach the research and writing class?" I said, "Yeah, because I can help out this band that I'd been kind of friendly with," and they were starting to make some noise and starting to have contracts thrown and all. But before that, I'd been talking to John about wanting to be an entertainment lawyer, and he said, "Why don't you just help out Bill's band?" And I was like, okay. So I went and did what Huey told me. It's exactly what I did at Davidson. I did what Huey told me. I said, Bill's band, because he knew Bill Berry from Macon connections, because John was being an agent those days in Macon. And so I went and I was already kind of helping out Bill's band, but there's a way to create a role just to help. I was a volunteer. I was a volunteer early days, and I guess all these years later, I'm a well-paid volunteer from some very generous guys who are very talented, and I'd still pretty much do what I did. Starting about 1981 when I was at law school. So, luck. That was pretty much it.
So, most of you know I was an avid musician, and through the help of C. Shaw Smith, a band I formed with 2 other Davidson graduates, not from our class, appropriately titled Cathexis, because we wanted our music to be so obscure and unpopular that no one would listen to it. But Shaw introduced me to 2 record labels in New York City, Arista and Elektra, and we were soundly rejected by both. So I had a brief, very unheralded career as a performing musician. And then through Davidson, I went and taught in Kenya, as many others from the school had done, and that put me on a path of international development work, and I spent a year in Cambodia and 2 years in the Sudan with UNICEF and Save the Children in Care. And then I had another incarnation as an entrepreneur. My wife and I started a company called Bright Horizons that does early childhood education. And they asked me to write some children's music for summer programs we were doing. And I started doing that, and all the people who I recorded with were Berkeley faculty. And I knew and revered Berkeley as a musician. And so 16 years into Bright Horizons, I felt like I've been doing this a long time. Maybe I should do something else. And Berkeley was looking for a new president, and I knew a lot of people there, and I had no real qualifications. I was not a very successful musician. I didn't have a PhD in anything. I'd never worked or taught in higher education, but they were desperate, and I've been there 14 years, so it's an amazing place, and we can talk more about it in a minute. But I will say, when you mentioned, when the introduction mentioned the campus in Valencia, Spain, I did the Classics Abroad thing in Greece and Italy, and that really had a profound impact on me. And I think North Americans need to get the hell out of North America and see another part of the world. And Spain is a really nice transition because it's not a rough spot to live, but it's a very different culture, very different set of values and history. So, I think that was a very explicit part of my Davidson experience that I've tried to apply at Berkeley.
That's awesome. Well, over spring break my senior year, I went to Little Town, Macon, Georgia, and actually closed the deal to get my first job. So when I graduated May 28th, I knew where I was going. And Alex Hodges, who ran Paragon Agency in Macon, said, 28th, you'll be here on the 29th. I said, well, first of all, that's Memorial Day. I don't think anybody will be working on Memorial Day. I want a little time off after college. I wanted to travel. And I said, I'd like a little time off. He said, be here June 12th. So I said, yes, sir. So I actually started my job. I went and started a college division for this company called Paragon Agency, and I knew historically at all the other agencies, you worked in the mail room, you worked your way up to a desk, then you did all this training. It was a 2 or 3 year process. And I'm a guy who can't type. I still am a 2-finger guy, and I knew I had to come up with a better idea. So I devised a plan, and it actually got accepted. And I went right from college to being an agent 2 weeks later, which started June 12th, means next week will be my 40th anniversary as a music agent. And one of my earliest clients, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, is playing Nashville next Tuesday, and we're having a party. It'll be a good time for all. From there, one of the guys there was a guy named Ian Copeland, who's brother Stuart Copeland, the drummer of the Police, and when that whole new wave punk scene started in the late 70s, he was in Macon, Georgia. That's a long story in itself. But he decided he'd move to New York and start his own company. I was the only single guy with no kids, so I was easily transferable. He asked me to go with him. I moved to New York, started a company, hugely successful. After 2 years, we had the first, second, and third records on the chart, Joan Jett, the Go-Go's, and the Police, and we were a company of like 8 people. So we were hugely successful, having a time of our lives, and I owned a small percentage of it by word, and when it came to meaning something, it wasn't quite the same, so I departed and started my own company, and it was called H1, and I had this long history. Had signed Amy Grant, and that's a story in itself. And then once you have the queen of anything or king of anything, you get everything else starts calling. So all of a sudden, in a matter of a short time, I had a Christian roster, probably a dozen acts. So I left, and it was funny, but Christian acts and reggae acts is a real dichotomy. All very spiritual. And did that for 2 years and was successful. Hired my brother Scott, who was a concert chairman at Davidson College, and as soon as he graduated, he came up and joined me. And we did really well, and then I got a phone call, and I met my wife in New York, had my first son in New York. And so at the age of 29, I just got married, had a child, started a new business, had 6 employees, and I was just over my head at a young age. And then I got an offer to buy my company and move. ICM, I moved to the West Coast, ran their contemporary division for 5 years. Other than getting the paycheck to buy my company, it was the worst decision I made because it was not a good company to work for. Sorry, anybody on live, I'm sorry. But, I had an opportunity to move to Nashville when country started exploding. We always called it the Class of '89, and when it was Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Vince Gill, Clint Black, it was a new wave of country becoming hip and popular and financially very viable. And so all of a sudden everybody wanted to get in it, and I had several opportunities, and I took one to move from LA to Nashville with a creative artist agency. And we started in '91. They said, This is going to be a small, intimate office of 4 people. He's definitely got an old bio because now we've got 114 people at the company, and it's been great to see the company grow. And when I got a call, Tom Condon, who's he's a household name around football world. He called me from St. Louis and said, Huey, Condon, he said, hey, you got office space? You okay if I move down there? And all the jocks, in the music, all musicians want to be jocks. Most jocks want to be musicians. So it's just a natural fit. So I said, come on, dude, we'll make room for you. So we moved the football division there, and now we have some hockey people. We have a lot of branding and sponsorship people involved. So we've got a thriving practice. And anybody from our other offices that comes to visit, they want to stay in Nashville because, number one, we are really super nice. We do not wear egos on our sleeve, which is kind of rare for the music business or any kind of entertainment business. And there's no state income tax. Great place to live and raise a family, and we've been successful. And in transition, we're at our age. We're used to how many of you are retired, how many people are thinking about retirement. The 2 leaders, we've kind of moved to founding partners, and we did a contract and passing the baton over to build leadership up from the beginning. But when William asked me, he said, "What was it about Davidson that you can carry over?" Because I really struggled, because I was a guy who always knew what he wanted to do, and it really didn't have to get with a Davidson degree. And the friends that I've made and continue to make and continue to keep up with is the foundation, and also C. Shaw Smith. We talk about professors. He wasn't legally a professor, but he was my professor. And he was the guy that mentored me. If you heard Ann Quinlan speak, she was talking about mentoring and who mentored you. And he was the guy that really kept my hopes up and fed me and gave me all the rope I needed. And I think I did okay with the rope. So.
I wonder if you guys, Roger and Burtis, would talk more about, what happened for you at Davidson that then played. You spoke about it a little bit, Roger, but if you would expand on that a little bit about how that played into then what has followed for you. I know that's a giant question, but maybe you can give us a tidbit.
Well, it's interesting when I was thinking about this panel, Berkeley, let me give you a little bit of a thumbnail sketch about it. In some ways, it couldn't be more different from Davidson. It's now 5,000 undergraduate musicians, because we just merged with Boston Conservatory. They had 800. And the typical student is very iconoclastic, very creative, lots of piercings, tattoos, exotic rainbow colors of hair. Often, I often say that I'm leading an institution filled with people who hate institutions. And those of you who remember me might know that I was sort of one of those myself. And it's sort of interesting in that way. So the things I feel like Berkeley needs that Davidson had is that sort of warmth and community and intimacy that lets people connect and not compete. When you're a musician and you've been the very best musician in Peoria and you come to Berkeley, it is humbling. It's humbling for me. Every one of my students is better than I am. Every single one. We wouldn't admit them if they weren't. So it's a very humbling thing, and it kind of it erodes your image of yourself and your hopes. And I think for artists, there's a vast amount of insecurity. The field is just so difficult and challenging. So part of what I'm trying to do is create the small, intimate settings of people where people can become real friends and support each other and not feel rivalry and not feel competition, and maybe put some of those insecurities and fears aside. So the Valencia campus, as an example, is not only a chance to get to know other people, but to be in a smaller cohort of 80 people, so you really get to know each other well. And these institutes we started, like the Global Jazz Institute, the American Roots Music Institute. Believe it or not, Boston and Berkeley is the epicenter of American bluegrass right now. The best artists in the world are coming out of our institution. So we have an institute around that. We have an institute of creative entrepreneurship, because the music industry is going through massive change and turmoil, which is bad in many ways, but it creates massive opportunities. So companies like CD Baby and Sonic Bids and Pledge Music were all started by our alumni. And Spotify, which didn't exist 10 years ago, has a $30 billion market cap. It's as valuable as Universal Records right now. So there's some opportunity. So we're trying to create these niches and enclaves where people can have some of what Davidson gave us.
I should add to that what he said about bluegrass. Boston, Massachusetts is the biggest country market in the nation. We sell more tickets in Boston than any other city.
I take personal responsibility.
Don't rush in the check.
So while we're amending, I got to say, Huey, I'm kind of bummed in your talk. You didn't mention that one of your early clients. You mentioned like your top three. You didn't mention the fourth client was REM, and you booked him at Davidson in 1983, both in February after C. Shaw had turned us down the first time. We played the 900 Room. We're all here and all proud, and like our little band, and we're thinking they've been doing this a while now, and it was 1983. And then they came back and played the Love Auditorium right under us here, and sold it out in May of 19. I'm pretty sure that they may still be the only band that ever got to play here twice in the same half year. And they were one of John Huey's clients, which he doesn't even mention. He's going through his illustrious career.
I don't represent him anymore. So.
Yeah, well, I do. So anyway, I guess the original question, I'll get back to some kind of semblance of order. I guess it's just reminding me, I was thinking of walking across campus today, that line in a song. I mean, Bruce Hornsby has a line in a song about a specific place, that same small town in all of us. And the one that always I go back to as a little kid, because I think he wrote it when he was pretty much like a little kid. But Neil Young has a line in Helpless about a small town in East Ontario where all my changes are there. And that's where I feel like Davidson, it's where all my changes are. This is where I went from being whatever I was, suburban Atlanta, DeKalb County, turbulent childhood kid, to I got a place where there was this 4 years where I could be in this spot. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I knew I was supposed to go off to college, and I knew I was going to, there's some training wheels around your life when you're in college. I'm noticing it with my own daughter, who's a rising senior, not here, but at Dickinson. And this was kind of the place I grew up. It's the place I had any sense at all that there was anything beyond what I already knew, which wasn't much. And getting here and then we had Dr. Ken Wood, who was a brand new experiential learning dude, and he got us involved in this, since he knew we were doing this internship at the Fulton County Jail, thanks to an alumni collection, Judge Jack Etheridge, whose daughter Margaret was in our class. We got to work in a prison, a low security prison in Mecklenburg County, and I'd never done anything like that. It just opened my eyes up to a lot of things, and it started, between becoming a history major kind of by default, because I had less requirements left of history to be a major, and I got to keep Malcolm Parton, so I just decided to be a history major. That's how much I put into that thought. But it seemed like there's kind of only one thing to do, and since I wasn't going to become a teacher or get a job, I better go to law school, and that was another place to kind of discover and to get to play off of my things I care about, like music. And like early days, I guess I was reflecting when I sat and heard Dr. Quillen speak one time, talking about the value of a liberal arts education. And it's not so much what you know, it's learning how to figure things out. You learn well enough to solve problems. And I can think of many times early in the band's childhood, in the band's babyhood, when they were just getting started, that I was kind of the person, hard to believe now, but I was kind of the more grown-up person who had a degree. And I was able to help sort of figure things out. And they didn't always relate to exactly the law. It wasn't something I learned in law school particularly, but it was kind of, how to navigate things, how to, transactional intelligence or whatever it would be. So I feel like I got a lot of care and nurturing here from some professors who took a real interest in my life and taught me how to write and taught me how to, study under pressure, because I generally did do that, study a lot under pressure. And so, it then translated into this wider world of what turned out for me to be, I didn't really get in the music business, I got in the REM business for all those years, but it ended up being a really good little niche to be a part of.
I actually remember the phone call that he and I had.
Yeah.
You were just anxiety about, I don't know,
I don't know
law
what to do.
school, I think what I
Third year.
want to do. And that's like, dude.
Just help out.
Bill Berry was the drummer of REM, and he was the office guy at Paragon Agency. He drove us whenever in Macon, Georgia's 90 miles from Atlanta, whenever we had to go cover a show, he would drive the car back and forth. And, he was still a high school kid. And then he decided, well, I better go to college.
He was pre-law Georgia.
Went to Georgia and met the other guys and formed a band, and next thing
we
you
met
know-
on the concert committee, because I'd gotten on the concert committee in law school. I said, can I be on the concert committee? And they're like, well, or what class are you in? I said, well, I'm in law school. They said, well, we gotta find out. I'm like, come on. It couldn't hurt to have a law student. I remember the day that Bill quit, because this band had started, and the guy made an announcement, Bill was gonna quit, and we're like, well, you could be in a band and still be on the concert committee, but Bill was like really serious about this band, and yeah, you gave me really good advice, just help those guys out. I was already kind of doing it, but
Yeah.
I appreciated that.
So I want to spend a lot of time letting you all ask questions, but I'm going to first give the panel a shot at asking each other some questions. But before they go there, Burtis mentioned that C. Shaw turned down REM the first
We have a
time.
letter.
And it does go to show you that that college advisors don't know very much, and I've tried to use my own story about that as a way to teach Davidson students how much they should pay attention to me. And I'm gonna tell a story. So I've failed several times in responding to other people, but certainly to John. John offered me the Zach Brown band, and I tried to get students to pay attention to them, and we got nowhere, and so we turned down the Zach Brown band, and they never performed at Davidson. But my first shot was, John called me. John, were you at Frontier? Is that where it was? You had been out for a year. When did you start dealing with the police?
Just tell me the band. Yeah.
Police.
Yeah.
And so, so it's lots of them, okay. So John called me about, he said, I want you to listen to me for just a minute, but I have for you, for Davidson, the next Beatles. I'm going, how do I respond to this? So I just said, tell me more, you know, and John, you know, laid it on thick, and I then passed it on to students, and we didn't get anywhere, and so I, as an advisor, helped the students to turn down the police. And so, as I say, I use that as a way to tell students how much they should pay attention to me. After I left to go on and work at Cornell for a while, then John was able to find other people who would buy the police for Davidson. But anyway, so it wasn't just C. Shaw who made mistakes. So I wonder if you guys have questions of each other before I open it up.
I have a great quote that I thought I would share. You all remember Hunter Thompson, journalist? He said, "The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free, and good men and women die like dogs. There's also a negative side." So it just seems like, there's something about music that is so powerful and captivates us all. And I think the three of us feel really blessed that we've gotten to spend a significant share of our lives in the field. But it also is really hard, and it really does chew people up. And, you know, if you're really successful, that can be a bad thing. I mean, the big success often destroys people more than failure does. That's one of the things I love about bluegrass or some of these more niche music.
They don't make any money.
They don't make enough money to be self-destructive. So I just wonder if you guys have thoughts about that, because you've nurtured artists who've had, you know, ups and downs and everything in between.
Yeah, I'm on a board of a foundation called the Onsite Foundation, ONSITE, and mostly all y'all know I lost a son 4 years ago, and one of the things we just did, we started up a retreat for parents who lost kids at Onsite, and it's a mental therapeutic for mental health, just a retreat center for whatever capacity. There's CEOs of companies that go there, just when you get stuck. You know, we all have been in that space. When you look in the mirror and you go, who is this? Am I doing this, that, or the other? Well, I represent talent. And what I sell, I'm a salesperson. I sell humanity. And it's when you take some struggling, it's a music business, a feast or famine business. You're either really poor or all of a sudden you're extremely wealthy. And that's enough to fuck with anybody's head. Excuse me, Facebook. And on-site has been a great respite for people who just got to deal with, no one knew my name, and now no one will leave me alone. And that flip can happen in a matter of a year. Or I can't pay my bills to, wow, what do I do with this dough? And it's an interesting thing. And what's interesting now is convincing people we're all this way. We're all a bit screwed up. We all could use help. We could all use therapy to a certain degree, or someone we trust to talk to who's qualified to give an answer. And on-site's just been a great place to redo it and refocus in on people getting to know their own humanity and who they are as people. I mean, I've got a person going in tomorrow. I had a person come in last week. I've had 5 clients go there in the last four months. And it's just a great place to go. And you know, I kind of started with a curveball on this thing for my kid, but the industry has just really embraced it because, you know, suicide's a huge problem. I mean, we saw Anthony Bourdain and Nancy Spade going, you know, it's just something that's going on. And there's nothing worse than it. I mean, I know several of my friends here have lost kids. That's the worst thing anyone could ever go through is losing a kid. But we used to have 52 people come to some sort of light, come back in their hearts when we had this program for 40 kids that had passed away. But needless to say, back in the music tie-in, it's a reflection of life. When artists come out and create art, I think we need more, to be honest with you, it's become too corporate. It's become too manufactured, too much. I like the music that kind of birthed out of the 60s and 70s where it was part of revolt, you know, it was a thing to get pissed off about. You wrote music about it, but it's gotten so corporate now, but it's still the essence of to me, of the heartbeat of what makes us tick. I don't know, starting to Bert?
Well, I'll follow up on that in just a minute because I'll pick up on something William said. I think I'll get back around to this if I can keep it in my head. You know, that becomes fun. But I remember I'm staying in the guest house right now. It's just great. It's as nice as it's ever been. And underneath where I'm staying or right next door to where we're staying. Room 7 is where I remember a union meeting being my freshman year when I was just starting to get interested in union. And that's when I heard that we'd come back from school and over the summer we passed on this singer from New Jersey called Bruce Springsteen because it was $1,000. And it was before Born to Run, and $1,000 was, you know, a pretty big sum of money. We were talking about $1974.
Right.
And anyway, we passed on it. So yeah, I guess we all. And for that matter, John Huey and I had a really fun time having Livingston Taylor here one time. But we had the brilliant idea to put Mike Green Band on, this cool jazz rock hot combo band from Atlanta, to go on after Livingston Taylor. We learned a very important lesson there. As all of our friends, 1,200 people, filed out of Lowe Auditorium, leaving about this many people in the front row, only people we knew. Don't put the headliner on first. You know, we learned that lesson in sophomore year, so you do kind of learn from your mistakes. And Mike Green, years later, was caught warning somebody that they were playing Davis, and watch out, there's a walkout problem. I'm not sure we had told him he wasn't, I guess he knew he wasn't the headliner, but man, we took it on the channel now.
It was awfully loud, too.
But
Very loud.
yeah, I think the thing about music right now, I mean, there's I remember seeing, tying back to Springsteen, you know, there's the great line that I've seen the future of rock and roll. His name is Bruce Springsteen. It was written by, you know, a rock critic named John Landau, who then for the next 45 years has been his manager. But he'd written that line in Rolling Stone. And I remember about 15 years ago, out in Athens, probably on the early side, because I don't really stay out that late anymore, but I'd heard a band just as good as anybody had ever seen, and they all have part-time jobs. And I said to a friend, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and it's this band who has part-time jobs that still gets to play music. It's more of a hobby. It's always been easy to be a musician. It's always been, well, easy to be a musician as long as you're willing to learn how to be a musician. It's always been, having a music hobby has never really been a problem. There was a time we came along when it was a lot easier to make a career. Are people still making careers in music today? Absolutely. It's a lot harder than it was. There's the paths we took. People say to me, how would R.E.M. do it now? I'm not sure they would. They certainly would be signing up for a different job than they did in 1980 when they got together and decided that they wanted to write songs, make records, play concerts, travel, see the world, see what happened. It's just, people can still do that. I think it's a much harder thing to, you know, use the corporate word to monetize. And so I remember 20 years ago, right around the time of Napster, and I believe there's something like 5 times as many records being put out right now than there were when Napster started. So some would say copyright law is working great. And we've got Spotify and Rhapsody and streaming services, things that Rogers incubated and that his group's involved with. But it's harder and harder to really win that lottery and get to the point where you've got a sustainable livelihood as a musician. It can be done, obviously, and there are ways to do it while you keep the part-time job, the same way lots of writers do, lots of people in the creative, community theater people. Not everybody gets to make a living at what they do, but it just gets harder and harder as a musician to do that. And finally, my long-winded answer will say that as a lawyer, what you learned and what I told people on the first day of entertainment law class is you got to draw the contract up that can handle 3 kinds of situations: wild success, abject failure, or something in the middle. Because the same contract, same words, someday somebody might get it out of a drawer and say, well, what does the contract, and you got to go back and you got to figure it out. And that's after all these years of either one of those scenarios happening.
I remember you told me a story where REM asked you if they should sign a contract, and you said, do you expect to be successful? And they said, well, we hope so. And he said, then don't sign the contract.
Yeah, if you sign a contract involving a big advance, you are betting against the house.
Yeah.
You're betting that you'd rather take the money now because you're never going to make it back. So plenty of people should take that big advance, and that's why they do. But in our case, we were never. I never knew I told you that story.
Yeah.
That's funny.
You told it.
What year was
you told
that?
it at Berkeley.
Oh, okay.
When I had you up there. So
Yeah.
One thing I would say about careers in music, though, is that we think of music as an industry filled with performers who play venues or who release records, but many of our most successful alumni are not performers. In fact, I have an alum who I believe has written the most popular music in the history of humankind. Anybody want to guess what that might be?
K-pop?
Not Psy. He's a Berkeley alum, the Gangnam Style guy. That's pretty popular. 3.5 billion people have watched that on YouTube. But the guy who wrote the Game of Thrones theme is a Berkeley alum. He's an Iranian named Ramin Djawadi. And that TV show has been both watched legitimately and illegitimately more than any TV show in the history of media. So a lot of alums make money writing music for all these TV shows and films and video games. And if you think about the explosion of high quality television series and miniseries and the like, all those have excellent music, like feature film quality music.
Yeah.
So a lot of alums of the college are making money there. And the #1 employer of Berkeley alums, surprisingly, is Apple.
Yeah.
The guy who runs Apple Music is one of our alums. And a lot of people who are good composers or songwriters also have a technology brain, and they can do software engineering, so they've been drawn into that vortex of what's really happened is the technology industry has taken over the music business.
Yeah.
And so a lot of musicians have ended up in the technology space, either directly or indirectly.
But also, I'm going to comment on Bert. He managed to work with a rock band, and rock is not the genre of popularity right now, I would think. Chance the Rapper, who makes his own album on his own, owns 100% of it, puts it out, and wins the Grammy for Best New Artist. Rap business is doing okay right now. Country's doing great, So it's everything's cyclical. It'll all come back, but I think it's. And online it's been the great democratization of the industry. You have a shot. You got to make your own statement. I mean, we're now labels. Are basically what are you doing on your own? How many what's your socials look like? They don't even, before you even listen to a demo tape, they want to see what somebody's socials are. What kind of street cred have they created? And we're usually the first ones to sign talent now. The labels are asking us, what are you guys into?
Right.
And then publishers too. What?
You're the indicator.
Yeah.
And it's also where more of the money gets made for many people.
Well, I'd say that Universal right now, you talk about Universal, I think sold, a dozen years ago for $5 billion. I think they market cap of $20 billion right now. So streaming there's no poor, they've got to figure out how to redistribute the wealth because all the money, I think there was a film called The Last Songwriter. It was all about how songwriters are getting screwed. And I was asked to go and represent the film, a guy named Marcus Hummon. And so he says, what'd you think of the movie? I said, well, it was okay. He said, what do you mean okay? I said, well, you're sitting there protesting in Washington with senators and congressmen. Spotify is saying we give 70% of all our revenue to the rights holders, which for the most part are the labels. They got all the dough. You should be
Go
meeting.
fight with them.
Go fight with them. Why are you sitting there trying to educate? That's what's wrong with our country right now. You expect this senator or this congressman to become an expert on copyright law when your neighbor down the street's got all the money. So I said, and that's getting worked on right now. But I said, we ought to all get in a room to call the music industry and figure it out how to equitably split up the money in this new era, but not lean on Washington to do what we should do on our own. How about that? Don't you?
Now, one thing that we discovered as we were putting the panel together is that we're all from the sovereign state of Georgia. Yeah, and I have to point out, just in case any of you are not familiar with this fact, but the earliest and most famous recorder of blues was Ma Rainey, who's from Rome, Georgia. The creator of rhythm and blues, Ray Charles, was from Georgia. The creator of soul music, James Brown, is from Georgia. And the co-creator of rock and roll, Little Richard, was from Georgia. So when people talk about New Orleans or Chicago or New York, you just set them straight.
So I
They
wonder
gave you
if,
friends from Georgia.
Not to mention Otis Redding.
Otis Redding, Gladys Knight. Anyway, the list goes on. But those people started, those four genres effectively were started by those people.
I think I also says about in Nashville, I pretty much I've spoken to most of the universities there in the various classes. Belmont University has a music program, I think 2,000 people in it. And then I think Lipscomb's got a few hundred, and MTSU has a big program. Berkeley's has got 5, and you got a strong industry related. I've got one of his alum that worked for me, or worked for CAA, and I would tell these people when they say, "Oh, do I go to the music business program here, music business program here?" I said, what I suggest you do is get a great liberal arts education and get involved in the music scene on campus of some sort.
I think Marcus Hummon went to Williams, if I remember correctly. He wrote for the Dixie Chicks and a bunch of them.
Yeah, but get a great liberal arts education and get involved. And I say, don't wait till your spring.
And then go to
thing.
Berkeley after that.
Yeah.
We've had 3 Davidson kids come to us. Bill Lawing, some of the people who are really serious about music come to us after a more traditional education.
But
David connection, Terry Humble, last night at R77, was deeply involved in putting Rolling Stone out for quite a
His publisher.
We all had engagement with Terry.
still do. Yeah, he's in Knoxville, so yeah, as you know.
He helped run the Crossroads Festival. And
Still works for Eric a lot.
So you all had that on.
Yeah. He
Good
came to
guy.
the Rhode Island game this year with me. It's a good game. If you only go to one game last year, it was good. We got lucky.
He was the rising concert chairman when I was a rising junior and he was a rising senior, but he got married and decided he didn't really want to do it. So I'd gotten a letter from C. Shaw saying, "Hey, do you think you want to do this for 2 years?" And I was in Africa. It was just my sophomore year. My family, my dad was a professor and they were taking his sabbatical over there. So I created a sophomore year abroad or term abroad. And so that's when I kind of gave up the pads because I lost 20 pounds in 3 months over there. And also got a letter saying, "Hey, do you want to be concert chairman for 2 years?" And I went, that's where my career is, not on the gridiron. So, and now, thank you, Terry. Thank you, Terry.
Other questions?
You got one. If you guys were talking to parents, say with a 5-year-old who just love music, is there some sort of advice or counsel you give to parents of kids who just clearly just love it?
A 5-year-old, stay in school.
Yes, sir.
I thought it was interesting, the point,
We can answer more.
I thought it was interesting, one of the points you made earlier, that rock and roll music, there's no money in it now, and rap music is a huge cultural shift in taste. Does the industry anticipate that stuff, or you just happen to be there when it happens?
A little bit of both.
You
I say
two's
that
doing
old
okay.
rock, I mean,
There's
rock.
still some rockers out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you two.
Old
they're
rockers,
all right.
yeah, old rockers. I'm just saying, format, there's not a lot of,
I know,
you know.
Well, hip hop hop is a very, very vital part of the music industry. And you travel to any country on earth, and there's an indigenous form of hip hop as well. The Arab Spring, there were Egyptian hip hop artists who were rapping about injustice in the Middle East. So you hear it infused, and country even has sort of a hip hop vibe to it now.
You think?
Yeah. So you know, I think the beauty of music is that it's revolutionary. And so, you know, the Beatles and Elvis and Sly and the Family Stone overthrew Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. And then along comes R.E.M. and the Police and another, you know, Nirvana and Pearl Jam. And then hip hop is the next wave. And you know, you see it infusing itself into everything. One of Quincy Jones is another famous Berkeley alum, and he said, hip hop is the triumph of rhythm over melody and harmony. Those are the three key elements of music, and you know, it's very powerful stuff. And I think our generation doesn't know it. We resist it a little bit, but I would encourage you to listen to good hip hop. And you know, when Lin-Manuel Miranda was doing Hamilton, he was reading the Hamilton biography on a vacation, and he wanted to do a musical about it. He said, I need to transmit so much information that traditional Broadway songs will not do it. I need to rap this, because then I can tell the whole story. So he actually chose hip hop as a form for Hamilton, less because of the musical genre and more because he could deliver a lot of information very quickly. And then I think with respect to social change, hip hop is the one part of the music industry now that is taking on some of the big issues of the day. So if you haven't seen This Is America by Childish Gambino or seen some of what Kendrick Lamar is doing, I would encourage you to check it out, because it's doing what radical rock and roll was doing when we were kids.
To Steve's point about I think that what should you tell students? I really do think you tell them to stay in school. I mean, when they're in college, I mean, a lot of people have demo tapes, a lot of people are interested. But I do think at this point, as a parent, it's just not necessarily worth counting on that being your career. I think you ought to get a liberal arts degree, like John said. I mean, we're lucky enough to have done that. And some people do, and it works, but.
Well, the other thing I would add is love music.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry when you're 5 or when you're 15 or even 20, don't worry about how you're going to make a career. Love music, be good at music, and then be open to the fact that you don't have to be R.E.M. to be successful. You can be their manager, you can be their producer, their engineer, you could be their booking agent. You know, there's so many opportunities for you, and if you're cut out to be Bruce Springsteen, then go for it, but most people aren't. And honestly, I admire Bruce Springsteen, but musically, there are a lot of people I admire more. You know, part of the music business.
Did you see his Broadway play?
Yeah.
I thought it was incredible.
He's amazing. The speech he gave at South by Southwest, you can find it online. It's one of the most brilliant analyses of contemporary music you'll ever find. In fact, you should just go Google that thing and watch it.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
It's funny, my wife. My wife's from.
Just call Huey. He's got tickets.
My wife's from Manhattan, and she had never seen Bruce Springsteen. I said, "Why? He's a Jersey guy. If you're a New Yorker, you just totally discount New Jersey." So I went crazy, and then so Zach calls me and said, "Hey, can we go see Springsteen when we go for the Grammys?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "I get to buy $850 tickets, 2 sets of them, and write it off." And so my wife, I said, "Honey, but you've never seen Springsteen, but you are," the night before the Grammy Awards. And she goes, "Ugh." And you know, she was so blown away. She ordered the music and his bio on the way back to the hotel after the show. He was truly remarkable, and you could tell he had a lot of therapy too. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective of The Voice, American Idol, and all the big TV shows, all the industry.
Well, we still represent Carrie Underwood and clients like that, but they're few and far between of how many have broken through. You know, we represent Kelly. We represent the show. We put the show together, and the way we got that deal was a co-pro with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola put a bunch of money into it, and that got us a deal at ABC, right? Yeah. And had a hugely successful run, and the tour made a ton of money. And then individually, you know, we had some stars in it, and just like anything, it's just another outlet of success. voice still hadn't broken anybody. No one's really succeeded on that show.
My take on it is it's very controversial within the Berkeley community, and a lot of faculty enjoy not liking it. And we had a young woman on The Voice this year, and her boyfriend was on American Idol at the same time, which was kind of cool. Jackie Foster was her name. But what I say to faculty is, would you rather 14-year-olds be watching The Real Housewives of Marin County, or mud wrestling, or duck, whatever that thing is? What's that thing? Duck Dynasty, or watching really pretty good music performed by really good musicians? I think, you know, it exposes the 5 and 10-year-olds to good music. So it shouldn't be the whole industry, because you're never going to find a Bob Dylan winning something like that. You're never going to find a truly original voice coming through a system like that. But, I mean, Carrie Underwood's the real deal. Kelly Clarkson's the real deal. There are a lot of really fantastic artists who have sort of been lifted by that. And for my students, it helps their career. Jackie's going to have a much stronger career having gotten to the final 8 than had she not participated.
My experience with that, I don't know if y'all have any experience with teenage children, but I have a daughter, and this was 7 years ago. The band was making what was going to be their last record. We pretty much knew it at the time, but it was in Nashville in 2010, and we got a phone call that Glee was going to. There's a TV show, popular TV show called Glee, kind of like what you're talking about, and they were going to use "Losing My Religion." And, you know, so we, of course, approved it. They're going to pay us money and put our song on their TV show, and a lot of people will find out about it as a result. So we thought that was a pretty good deal. So we said yes, and I got to share with my teenage daughter, you're constantly, at least if you're me, you're trying to make sure your kids realize, you know, that what you do is actually work, and that it has some relevance. And, you know, they're kind of hard to convince of that. But I told Addie that we were going to be on Glee, and that we were available in the app for Glee. And her first question was, is it free? And I thought that was kind of like symbolized a lot of what
Yes.
because the most important thing to her is, that's great, Dad. Is it free app? Now, she pays for apps. I mean, she observes copyright. She downloads music, at least she did at the time. Now she streams, I guess. But I thought that was kind of a telling, like, that was her reaction to it. Oh, I don't know. What was it, 99?
How many people here subscribe to a streaming service and pay for it?
Premium.
Good.
How many do the free tier? It's good
Well,
too. Those are both
If
good.
you care about music, step up to the subscription. It's not that much money, and the artists get a lot more money.
It's good and good.
And as John says, it's got some issues in terms of how the proceeds are shared, but it will,
It will get there
it will
eventually.
be the salvation of the music industry, from going from free, where everything was file shared and stolen, to a world where at least some micro payments come from people all over the globe. And none of your artists ever got paid from China, India, Brazil, or other parts of the world. And now, if we can get micro payments for our artists from all those places, it could amount to a career for a lot.
Yeah, we're big on Spotify in like South America, which was never a big market for us, because it wasn't a big market, period.
But back to what you said about, I was saying about a child that's inspired or thinks that want to maybe follow it. And I just keep thinking about my career here, because when you sit there and go, what I do for a living, I do not need a college education, and you go to Davidson College, it's somewhat you need to have your head examined, because this was a hard place to go. But my dad, has a PhD, and I knew he's a Presbyterian minister, so they kind of go hand in hand with Davidson. I knew I had to get through it. I knew music was my love, and that's where my career was going to be, but I just had to get a degree. And the kid was a 2.8, 3 point, what, it didn't matter. Do I get a sheet? So I think having that saying, hey, if you have the love, okay, but you need your education. You need to keep through it. And when the schools I asked, people go, how do you live a balanced life? And I go, you don't.
You don't.
And I said, you do not. This is a life, and anybody that excels in anything to the top of their career or the pinnacle, an Olympic athlete does not live a balanced life. They're in the pool, they're in the weight room, they're in whatever it is their trade is, mastering that, spending a ton of time on it, and hopefully you've got a balance on the other side. Luckily, I had a stay-at-home wife, and she's understood what I did for a living, and it's still, even though I'm empty nester, I'm out 5 nights a week. She may be out 2 nights a week. So you don't live a balanced life. You follow your dream, you follow your love, but obviously get to the basics. If you want to do that, then take care of this first.
I've got a question over here.
Can you give us some, insight on what's going to be the next hot artist to follow? tips and places?
Well, one prediction I'm making is that if you think of the 20th century and the early 21st century, it's the hegemony of American, British, and sort of British Commonwealth country music between Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, UK, Ireland. But the #1 YouTube video in the history of the world is Despacito, a Puerto Rican, which Puerto Rico is technically the US, although I'm not sure people in Washington know that. But it's a Latin song, and the number 3, I think, maybe number 2 video is this Gangnam Style. It's a Korean song in South Korea by a 30-something Korean guy no one had ever heard of. So I do think that the internet is going to reduce the hegemony of North America in the music industry, and we're going to hear a lot more voices from other parts of the world, and they're going to have a shot at being part of the big American and European music industries. But they are listening to American music. I mean, as I said with hip hop, there are some amazing DJs and MCs in lots of other countries who've absorbed hip hop and then given it either an African dimension or a French dimension or even a Korean dimension. So that would be my one prediction.
No groups for us to.
Oh, okay. New groups to check
Casey
out.
Musgraves.
Well,
I love Casey.
Well, I just heard about her. I love it.
Oh my God.
Saturday Night Live thing is like, my God, what a great song. That's
Mine
my
was
joke.
hooked on. No wait. Daddy's hooked.
do you have anything?
Merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Daddy, mommy, daddy.
Yeah. What is it?
It's a great song. I'd
Brother's
slow-
hooked on
slow
Mary
burn.
Jane.
Slow burn.
Daddy's hooked on Mary 2 doors down. Oh God.
She sang it, I don't represent her anymore, but my client Brandy Clark wrote that song. So
Wow,
that's
that is
really-
that.
beautiful.
That
she's
is
a
one of the
great writer.
greatest songs. Check that out.
Luke Combs is kind of, I mean, if you're in any kind of country, he said it's third #1, but he's a graduate from Appalachian State. He's blowing up. He'll be selling arenas out in the next 12 months. He's doing really great. There's a kid we're trying to sign named Noah Schlotsky or something like that. It's a kid out of Orlando, Florida. Doesn't even have a deal yet. He's got like 9 million streams. And a really sweetheart guy.
What's his name?
He's mission driven. I can't spell the last name, but it's Noah. I think he's going to go by Noah. And a really cool guy.
Check out a band called Bent Knee. It's sort of like a punk rock classical ensemble. Really.
Are they
really-
students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we got-
Lucius, Bent Knee, Sierra Hull, Molly Tuttle, St. Vincent.
Lucius, they are out on tour with Roger Waters.
Yeah.
They're Roger Waters back there.
Yeah.
There's also an REM Monster 25th anniversary just for those of us. REM businesses, we have Monster next year. It's our 25th anniversary. The calendar says.
I think they should do a song for the 25th called Rediscovering My Religion.
Speaking of rediscovering my religion, one genre you guys haven't touched about is one that I would not have thought, even as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, I'd have much to do with at all, and that's contemporary Christian music. But yet my son is a pretty good guitarist, has decided to take it upon himself and plays band for the Episcopal worship service. There's actually a contemporary service in an Episcopal church. Go figure. And I still say 90% of it is what I like to call Jesus is my boyfriend type fluff. You know, it's not very good. But there's 10% of it, which God works in mysterious ways. That really the lyrics of it. And certain artists, Hillsong out of Australia, and Chris Tomlin, of course, out of Atlanta.
No, he lives in Nashville.
Oh, is he?
Chris is he's a client. So I
Okay.
represent Chris.
So what do you see in terms of that affecting the music industry and its growth and?
There's a huge worship movement. I think the contemporary side of the music. I mean, the money making, selling product, in touring, and selling tickets. It's swayed more toward the worship side from Hillsong, Bethel, Tomlin. Toby Mac does he's a client as well, and he does a great Hits Deep tour. I would say it's strong. I mean, it's kind of in the same zone right now. I think if you ask that question, you need to ask your kids, where are they on their spiritual journey? Because it's kind of almost mirrors the tone of the country right now. And they're just I see somewhat. We have another class on the spirituality in America right now. I think there's a lot going on right now, and Christianity and how it's being viewed and what are the takes on it. It's a little non-conventional in that direction. It's not the same old anymore.
One thing
But it's
I would
still good support, still good business.
One observation that people always say that American public music education is terrible. And it's really not that good if you compare us to Europe or other places. So the conundrum is, why are we so good at producing music that people in the world like if we don't do music education very well? And I've always felt like the secret is American gospel music, which is where R&B came from, and now contemporary Christian. Most of our best students learn to play in churches, and churches are the most competitive environments for musicians. If you don't show up and you don't play well, you lose the gig. And especially mega churches, you cannot have a mega church without a mega band that is as good as anything you see on TV or at the Apollo. So I think in terms of incubating music and artists, the whole contemporary Christian and gospel worlds are very important.
And I'll follow up on that. I think that I would take slight issue with what Roger said. I think there are places in this country where music education is not very good, like where they don't have it. Like in Chicago public schools, where there's no arts or music in a lot of the schools. But there are a lot of places, and I have a lot of, we live in a pretty challenging district ourselves. We have wonderful music education. But I'm not taking away the point about the churches and all, but generally generalizations don't work all that well. And I think that public education music teachers do a pretty good job where they still exist and where they're given the resources, and sometimes that's an equity issue, and you've got suburban New Jersey versus inner city, privatized, all kinds of schools. That's another hour, I think, so I'll stop. But I will just say, that's the one thing I would check about that.
But the tide's turned, or is turning. I'm on the CMA Foundation board, and we give $3 million a year away to music education, and to see how we started first in Nashville, now we're taking on the state of Tennessee, and it's right hand in hand with Hamlin, with Haslam, our governor, and there are other states that are stepping up, and I think it's going to be a public and private sector, because when you sit there, we have proven stats that say grades are better if you have music in your school. Your math scores are better. People are more engaged in schools, more engaged in class, and it's
Speaking of technology and change, I have a nephew who, I can't believe how much money he makes in lighting concerts. And the lighting is essentially.
You work for Strickland? You work for
Bandit
Strickland?
Lights?
Tate?
No, Bandit Lights, that guy is serious. He got arrested.
Strickland?
No.
Bandit Lights kind of Knoxville?
Yeah.
Yeah, my kid played on a ball team with him, but he knocked down the front door of one.
Turn the camera off.
The lighting program is an issue, and he's gone all over the world, and he's part of the performance for various bands. And what I understand, he's changing the lights.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
A whole bit. And you were just talking about technology changing everything. Here's somebody who's a performer, but it's not. It's in the context of lights. And I'm curious. I guess it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger thing.
They're old rockers, but both U2 and Roger Waters right now, I would contend that their shows right now are way better than they were in the early 70s in the Pink Floyd case, or in the mid 80s in U2's case. When you go see the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary, you go see Roger Waters right now, he'll probably be back next year here. It's an amazing experience because of the light, because of the digital, the pixels, whatever the technical stuff is. It's fully immersive. U2's got a thing where you go and you take your little app if you have one, and it's really kind of like, for somebody who doesn't, I kind of like the Marshall amps and bright lights and Leonard Skinner rocking out. That's kind of what we came from. But it's a much better presentation of The Wall right now, or of Joshua Tree, thanks to technology, thanks to the kind of stuff your nephew's involved in.
Time for one more.
Okay. One more. Yes, ma'am?
I'd love to know what artists or bands performed at Davidson when you were students during your 4 years that really had an impact on you.
Mother's Finest.
They're still playing probably tonight something. Mother's Finest is still going strong.
That is,
They were great.
That's one of those bands that,
I never understood why they weren't huge.
yeah, it's racism.
Race would account for a lot of
But that was the killing this band, and their songs were great, and my staff know how much I love them, so one of my chief of staff went out and found an old vinyl copy of Mother's Finest with Mickey's Monkey and
Fire. They still play Athens. They still play Athens about twice a year.
Yeah.
When they played here, though, I think we paid them $2,000. I'm pretty sure the contract was $2,000, which I don't know if that was a lot at the time, but it was a lot for us. And we didn't get the
Double what
Fireball.
you were not willing to give Bruce Springsteen.
Well, I know. It wasn't me. It was the year before. It was the year before. It wasn't me. But the Fireball that used to come out right and go off during fire did not make the trip. We were definitely disappointed. Students would be. But we were explained that there was some sort of a traffic out. Somehow the lights got left behind, which kind of sucked. But you know, you learn about the importance of contracts and what's in the contract. But that did happen on the Mother's Finest show. It was a great show otherwise, but the Fireball did not come down and explode during fire. I still
What was
haven't
that
gotten
bass player's name?
Wizard.
Wizard. Great bass player. Joyce Kennedy, was that her name, the lead singer?
Chuck Liddell played here, Sea Level. It was
They're
kind of
playing in
during one of the
Charlotte.
many Allman Brothers hiatuses. You came here
They're
with
playing in Charlotte next month, and I'm going to see them.
Chuck is?
No, Mother's Finest.
Oh,
And
wow.
they actually, I looked at their tour, and it looks like they're doing a lot of stuff abroad.
Yeah, they've always done a lot of stuff in Europe, Germany and Holland.
Yeah.
It's that T-shirt that says we're huge in Japan.
Roger Whittaker, I don't think it was.
We need to thank these guys for.
Yes.